Hello and welcome to the Tech Remedy podcast. I'm Jamie and I'm passionate about seeing businesses win using technology. In each episode, we'll talk to industry experts or business owners just like you. We'll uncover how technology has been used in the real world. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on LinkedIn for more insight and content to come. Tom, welcome to the Tech Remedy podcast.
Thank you.
So today I'm joined by Tom, who's head of the Microsoft platform at 7IM. Can you tell me a little bit about 7IM first of all, and then a little bit about your background and how you got into your current role?
Yeah, of course. So 7 Investment Management is an investment management firm, as it sounds. So wealth management. So we deal with private clients, we deal with advisors. So we've got two sides. So there's the investment management side of it, but keen as to why I was keen to join is there's also a platform as well. So we have a platform that other advisors use to manage their clients' wealth, manage trades and all things like that. So quite multifaceted in that way. And as a result, there's a huge tech element that sits behind that platform. And that was why I joined. Wanted to get into the finance industry after being a consultant in technology prior.
Yep.
And then this was an opportunity to be a part of one which was very much tech focused, tech first, because that was a key and continues to be a key driver of the business.
Yeah.
But that's my first for in-house client role for about 9 years, I think. As we were talking prior, I used to actually work in marketing straight out of university.
Yeah.
Always thought I was going to work in marketing, did marketing internships and all things like that. Did 1 year in marketing, came to a bit of a crossroads and was like, I'm not sure if this is exactly what I want to do. So I got 2 job offers at the time. One was to stay in marketing for a digital marketing role, and one was to do this thing called Microsoft Dynamics, which I wasn't quite sure what it was at the time, but it sounded quite interesting. It sounded techy, and I'd always had an interest in the tech side, even when I was in marketing. So that was a firm called Ebex, which I was there for 2.5 years, did the graduate scheme there, doing all sides of Microsoft Dynamics. And naturally, as part of that, happened to pick up as a speciality, just as part of the allocation of roles, a bit of Power Platform stuff there.
Yeah.
So I was naturally picking up more and more of that stuff, but actually started as sort of HR finance consultant for a bit. Then 2.5 years there, moved to PwC to begin with, to work on a large transformation as part of a finance and HR, whole transformation moving from SAP to Dynamics. Worked on that for a number of years, but as a result, I worked with the Microsoft Dynamics HR suite, which Microsoft have changed over the years how committed they are to that particular product. So it's been in and out of finance and operations for a while. They changed the name of it at least 3 times back and forth. And as a result of the lack of investment in, sometimes you had to use other means to fulfill the client requirement, which usually meant Power Platform. So whether I liked it or not, naturally over the years, I was picking up Power Platform skills and finding that the most interesting. So after that implementation finished at PwC, I then started picking up more and more roles, which was a Power Platform, and worked my way up to then lead the consulting Power Platform division. So had a team there, which we focused on all our consulting clients with chatbots, Power Apps, Power Automate, for the full suite, pretty much externally focused. And there was a small element of like internal focus there, just in terms of the UK. But yeah, 4 years I was there for, and then the offer for 7IM came up, and I thought, it was maybe time to do something, as I say, that was in-house, so I could be there and see the full transformation vision. Yeah. And also try a sector that was always interesting. Living in London, working opposite the city the entire time, I thought, I want to work where there's potentially a competitive advantage for London, and wanted to get into financial services. And as I say, that opportunity came up where it was the sector. Really liked the people, and the culture seemed really good, and there's a huge amount of tech involved there. And importantly, particularly for my job role and my background, they're Microsoft first.
Yeah, okay. And obviously, so we have done a Power Platform episode earlier in the series, so it's probably important for people maybe that haven't watched that or listened to it. Dynamics and the Power Platform are natively entwined, and not one of the same, but they're based on the same architecture and stuff like that. Yeah. So I guess having a good grounding in Power Platform stands you in good stead for Dynamics and vice versa.
100%, particularly on the sort of CRM focused apps. Obviously the finance ones and the supply chain ones are a little bit slightly different architecture, but they're increasingly converging anyway. So I think actually the first thing I trained on was the CRM piece.
Yeah.
Then went and did HR and finance for a number of years, then came back and did Power Platform. So the terminology is all the same, and the architecture, like as I say, is increasingly convergent to a point where a number of years ago, the vision from Microsoft was it was going to be one platform. I still think that's where they're getting there, although might be a bit distracted with AI things at the moment instead.
And in terms of, I guess, PwC, you work with external clients on different projects.
Yeah.
Versus now at 7IM, you're in-house, you're working to benefit 7IM as opposed to its clients.
Exactly, yeah. Before I'd be working pre-sales, making the sales, managing products, managing a team across multiple different clients in different sectors completely as well. So, public sector to insurance and banking, and a lot of context switching at the time. Whereas now the whole focus is on what's one client. Still feels like a consulting role at times because you've got different stakeholders.
Yeah.
Particularly when I first joined, it just felt like I was just at another client that was just maybe embedded in for a bit longer. And
Right.
I've been to offices where they give me my own laptop and I've got my own login, so it just felt like that for a while, and still does to a degree, which I think is good in a way because then you're still just servicing your internal clients. But you got the benefit now of being able to have that bit more strategic long-term vision. It's not just, well, we've got this statement of work that's going to finish. It's actually, well, I'm here for the long haul. I'm here to see through, and you can have sort of longer plans. When I was a consultant, you get to points where you really want your client you love working with, a great team, and you really want to do a lot with them, but their priorities might change. They might not have budget for the next phases, and you really want to do loads, but you'd have to stop for a number of reasons, or, your priorities are changing. You'd have to go something else. Whereas here, I get to manage those priorities a bit more and can work with the rest of my leadership team to actually look at that and really build something going forward.
And we were obviously talking before, you've got a go live happening.
We do, yeah, very nicely
timed
timed.
by the time this goes out. But you're at a kind of pivotal point, I think, at 7IM, aren't you, where you're starting that cloud transformation.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and I guess what the goals are?
100%. So we've got, as you know, we're tech first, but the company's been there 20 something plus years. So that there's a tech estate that's built up over time, and in a period where, when a company was founded, there was pretty much cloud wasn't really a thing. Everything was on-prem. So naturally, that's how it's been built up, and we've got dependencies and systems there. But the organization, maybe about 18 months ago, decided, right, we need to modernize. We want to scale for our ambitions, ultimately, so we can be more effective and manage more clients effectively. And to do that, we need to be in the cloud. Trying to manage that infrastructure ourselves, it's not going to work. So realistically, if we break it down, our key goal of all our transformation projects around that by moving to cloud is so that we can service our clients better and service more of them effectively. So we've got that, as you say, the go live this week it's the second go live this year across that program. This one's affecting mostly internal staff for a quite complex end-to-end process. There's a lot of a workflow tool with a couple of integrations, all stuff like that. But there is integration to on-prem because we're not fully off that yet. But then obviously cloud integration and we've always started with it needs to be cloud first unless we can't do, and then we have to integrate back. But working with a number of providers and third parties to get to that. So it's exciting for the firm to get this one. There's a lot of people who've put a lot of hard effort into this, and by, as you say, hopefully by this goes out, we'll be fully live and on to the next one. So by then.
Yeah, I think interesting that you mentioned, obviously, companies nowadays go out and either they don't know what they don't know, or they historically build up this IT infrastructure on what's available at the time, and you don't always get the chance to sit back, review, and maybe redesign or redevelop. And what we see happen a lot with clients is they just bolt on and bolt on and bolt on, and you get further and further into the rabbit hole. And I guess some point you've got to rip that band-aid off and say, like, we can keep going like this, but it's never going to be what we want it to be.
Exactly.
So I think it sounds really exciting, and obviously a good time for you to join as well. In terms of then how 7IM, I guess, came up with that vision and how integral like that's going to be to its future and where you're going, is that something that was like top down? Was it driven by internal people or a need by a specific program, or is it kind of just in line with the strategy overall?
I'd say it's a mixture. There's definitely a recognition at the top-down level that we needed to be a bit more agile about things, and we needed to be able to scale more. We've got ambitious growth plans to be able to manage more client wealth and ultimately have service the clients as best we can. And I think there was a realization throughout the organization that if we needed to do that, we needed to just have the ability to scale things up. So I think it was, they're definitely from a strategic point of view, it came down from sort of C-suite and ownership. But anyone who was working within those systems as well could sort of say, well, this could be improved. If we want to do more, we're going to have to sort of change these systems. So it probably was a business-led thing as well, but also from the sort of technology and transformation team, they're well aware of the IT estate, and then they'll have seen from people who've come in externally like myself, who've seen it in a new world where there was only ever cloud, right? A lot of the clients I worked with when I was consultant, I didn't have any on-prem stuff to deal with at all.
Yeah.
So I think they recruited really well in terms of bringing in people who've got that experience as well from hybrid estates, from full cloud estates, and bringing in new ideas about, well, could we do it this way? And it comes from our partners as well. So we work with a number of partners, and having that outside perspective and their expertise really helps. They can help challenge us, be the critical friend, but also our team starts to gain new skills and see new ways of doing things as well. So overall, I think everyone's bought into it for the reasons why we want to do it.
Yeah.
It's going to make people's lives easier. That's the idea in the day-to-day, so we can be more effective. It's going to get to our more strategic goals, but also means people in learning new skills as well, right? And that's good for career development and just job fulfillment.
Yeah. Some definitely really good points there. We'll get onto some of them in a little bit, because I think they're probably linked to challenges and things like that. But we mentioned digital transformation a little bit. For people that don't know what digital transformation is, can you give me your understanding or your, I guess, appreciation of what digital transformation is, and maybe a couple of examples of projects you've worked on in the past?
Yeah, sure. So I think nowadays any transformation project is going to be a digital transformation project at some point. It's very rare that you're going to be doing something in an organization that's not touching some kind of IT system. So I think we've moved away from, or particularly I like to be involved in projects that are not theoretical.
Yeah.
Writing down what something could be in something in terms of a targeting operating model and stuff is great, but that's not quite the transformation project yet. The actual enacting of it is a transformation project, and normally that's going to be your operating model is going to include people and processes, and those processes are going to involve technology.
Yeah.
So as a result, I think it's anything that involves change and changing the way that people work and the systems they use every day. And there's very little jobs there that aren't using some kind of technology on the day-to-day. So yeah, that's how I sort of define it. All transformation is digital transformation, realistically. It's increasingly changing, the tools that we use, and it's changed throughout time, right? But in the last 5 years, and we'll probably come into it a bit later, some of the new technologies that are there as a result. But I think where you move from a technology project or technology implementation to a digital transformation is about actually thinking about that wider impact on the firm.
Yeah.
So you might do a 6-week project to do one particular process. I wouldn't really call that digital transformation too much. It's a digital project, you're transforming something, but it's not transformation as a whole.
Yeah.
Digital transformation is actually changing the ways that people work. And that could be from your actual IT development teams, the partners you work with themselves in terms of ways of working. So are you using Agile when you were previously using Waterfall or other sort of techniques? What are the systems you're using to actually track and manage that work? But then also, how are you engaging your business as a whole, your end users, your C-suite as well, and your overall stakeholders in taking them on that journey? Because ultimately, people are resistant to change. They always have been. We all are. So you need to make sure you've got that whole buy-in across the organization, and this is how we're going to do it. This is what's going to change. It's going to be rocky at times. We always need to acknowledge that, right? There's no, if anyone's telling you that they've had a digital transformation project that went smooth the entire time, they're just lying, or they weren't trying hard enough. So that's kind of the way I'd sort of look at it across the definition. In terms of examples in my career, where I think about ones where that's really been the focus as well, or even if it wasn't the focus to begin with, maybe it was like a happy byproduct of it.
Yeah.
We did quite a lot of work in my previous role at PwC with the not-for-profit sector, using Microsoft Tech. And with one particular charity, we were sort of reimagining their volunteering system. So previously, that was all just done by a team with a number of spreadsheets. So an email would be sent in, someone would say they want to volunteer, and then a team would have to manage that. It was a national charity as well, so a central team would manage it, and then they'd be going through the spreadsheet and sending it out to that particular region. So nothing really centralized there as a result. We wanted to have a more digital solution to that, something that was more modern, that was cloud-based, it was Microsoft-based. But what was happening at the same time is that as an organization, they had pretty lofty ambitions to be more technology driven.
Yeah.
So there's things going on in the data world, and then we were sort of working with them from a big project piece. They were going into, again, working with agile that way, start to use Azure DevOps and things like that. But so what we started to see was there was a whole change in the way of working, and they were really good at investing in their resources as well. You can see a lot of organizations, they'll just get the partner in or a couple of third parties in, they'll do the A to Z of the project and stopped, and then they'll go, oh, we've got no one to support this, or we're not quite sure what to do next. They were particularly good in terms of the team were there working with us day in, day out, picking up the skills to the point where, and this is the biggest success of that project, the system itself was good and it does what it needs and it's still up and running today. But after we left, they were still able to carry on developing it.
Yeah.
They had a development team that had built up. They had a testing team that they had adapted to their new ways of working, and ultimately just had that bigger skill set. They could be more self-sufficient. Now that's digital transformation, right? That was a skill set they couldn't do before, and now they've met that project goal, but they're now able to meet some undefined goals yet of the future that they don't know they're going to need, but now they've got the tools to do that. Now that's where it becomes really powerful, and that's where it's interesting as well, because what does it mean as part of that is again, it goes back to the people. They're the ones gaining the skills. They're seeing new ways of working, and again, they do enjoy it more. So that's one of my favorite examples that I'll normally talk about. And there's other ones as well when we have that similar piece, but it's when you have that buying of we're all in this together, whether it's partner, client, consulting, etc. But you do need that buy-in from whoever's the organization where that's happening, which is similar to what we've got at 7IM as well, right? We've got a large transformation team who are upskilling, who are working with the partners daily, who are all bought into this. And that's why, again, I was intrigued to join 7IM, because they have this heavy investment in themselves, because I'd seen that working before in the past. And I was like, that's going to be a digital transformation project rather than one and done and just throw it away or it stops getting used or something like that.
Yeah, I think you made some really good points there. So digital transformation being more about bigger objectives, combined objectives, like delivering meaningful organizational change and benefits, as opposed to just one and done or the little pieces, is a real good point. And I know we'll probably get into AI in a little bit, but I see this a lot with AI and a lot of the stuff you see in the media. We're thinking too small. We're thinking about these little processes or little changes we can make, but we don't think about the bigger picture. And I think you touched on it there. People and process are central to this. Well, AI, digital transformation, everything we're doing. And I think you mentioned, or you touched on a few times there, about engagement and buying people in. On that then, so we see it as one of the big challenges when it comes to delivering change. And I think you maybe even mentioned people are resistant to change or don't like it natively. So what, other than the people, what are other challenges in digital transformation projects people should be looking out for? Maybe how do you approach that at 7IM?
I think the one that I've seen sort of most recently, particularly when you're working in sort of hybrid environments with new technology and old technology, there is anything that's been built up over a number of years, unless it's been really well documented and you've had like an architect managing that entire time, like an enterprise architect or lead architect, is that the dependencies between systems and things that are running, most organizations aren't fully just aware of that yet, and they don't find that out until, not that it's too late, but until they get to a point of, this team over there has developed this and it's broken XYZ over there. Or from the consultant side, before when I was there, I'd come in and say, right, this is what we need. We need these systems set up. We need access to this database, and then that would go to another team and another team and another team. So it's the dependencies that you have, which you don't want to knock out another business function. You don't want to slow them down when you're trying to improve as well, because that's obviously not going to be ideal. But having an awareness of these dependencies and how you manage them effectively, because that requires the collaboration as a result in terms of, initially, again, people are going to be resistant. No, don't change my process. Don't knock out my system, and don't make it take longer. But you need to have the buy-in where it's like, well, actually, if we're able to find a way to work together here, it's going to be beneficial for everyone. And we've really tried to improve on that in 7IM in the last couple of months, because we've got such a vast transformation product. There are dependencies, whether we like it or not, and we're still finding some to this day. But ultimately, by having the right governance around that as well. So if the governance doesn't exist, and in some places it won't to begin with, you need to have owners of these particular systems and these particular processes. And that's one thing we're trying to really improve as well. Then a lot of these systems will have external interactions. Now, who's managing that relationship with the vendor that you're working with, etc.? It's nowadays with SaaS applications as well, there's going to be updates coming as well. Now, how are those updates potentially going to come and affect your organizations, having someone or a team of people in-house who are responsible for each of those dependencies externally, but then being aware of those dependencies internally. So if we go and change this and we do a high level design, or we're going to go to an architecture design board, are we fully aware of the effect this might have? Because you could be stopped in your tracks pretty quickly if you're going to knock out a business critical system, or what you predicted might take 5-6 weeks might take 3 or 4 times that, because you've got to wait for certain periods of change freeze and things like that. So I think that's always been the thing past the people, where you go, well, actually, if we had smooth sailing and we know exactly what we want, it's going to take this. But there's always unforeseen dependencies that probably most projects will just not skip over at the part, but everyone's got this most enthusiasm at the beginning of the project, and you're really like, fine, we'll cross that when it comes to it. And then you've got the dependency, and then you've got, well, whether you're an organization who's paying for certain developers or contractors or whatnot to be there, and they can't do what they need to do, or you're the clients or you're the partner side, and you've got your team is ready to work, but they're blocked a bit there, and you're trying to work together around it. So that dependency management is, particularly I've seen in the last year, something that's really jumped out of me as something that can really slow people down.
Yeah, I must admit, we've had clients and projects where they've had a system designed and developed, but then that internal resources left or moved on.
Yeah.
And they've not passed that knowledge around, or they're not documented it properly. And you get to a point where somebody thinks they know what X, Y, and Z does, but until you not unplug something, but until you make a change or until you investigate it, you don't quite know what else is further down that chain.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good point. I guess then that kind of leads on to company culture and creating tribal knowledge. And you mentioned there about having owners of different products. Do you have a way at 7IM then of kind of, I mentioned tribal knowledge as a term then, of filtering that throughout the team, or do you just have a particular team that's responsible for a element and the kind of buck stops with them? It's just them that deal with it. How do you approach that?
I'd say we're switching it a bit at the moment. So previously it would have just sat with the business and users.
Yeah.
But it's different systems were built up over time, and now we've got more of an enterprise technology strategy. It should be a combination. So the technology and transformation teams themselves should be able to help the business in terms of bringing them together. Right, this is what we should be expecting. These are the tasks that should be done regularly, and this is how it fits into the overall strategy. But then if we look from a technology team specifically, we've got chapters of, our business analysts, our tests, our low code team, our developers. So even though they're split across various agile squads, they do sit with their chapters regularly to, share that knowledge, to work out what's going on, hopefully see some of those dependencies as well. So we do try and have that sort of horizontals that sit across our squads as well, because then we can start to really build up that knowledge overall, that ownership of those over particular things. But what's particularly good is we have things like solution surgeries where some of the lead developers will come together and say, bit of a problem I'm having here, or this is a proposed solution, what do you think? And architects sit on that, and various other people. Really good way sort of challenge. Now this is sitting within like the technology and transformation team itself. What we probably will look to do in the future is even more business involvement in that, right? Because they're the ones who the problems we're trying to solve. Now some of them will be a literal technical challenge, or this API doesn't work or something like that. Then you do need just to bring that particular chapter behind. But having that and then communicating out to it, I think the storytelling of that is really key. How did you solve the business problem? This is what the business did to do that. Yeah. This is the involvement, because then you start to create ideas in other people, and they go, well, actually, that's similar to the problem I've got. So I know if I go and engage with this particular area of the business, or in a different world, if you're working with your transformation partner as part of that, then you get a bit more inspired and able to do that. So you do need to share the successes as well. So collaborate on the problem solving, but then when you have solved the problem, let's go and talk about it, and because that's what people are more interested in, hearing the story rather than something doesn't work. Oh, now it works. Okay. You're more engaged if there's an actual narrative around it, and you think, how does that relate to my role in particular?
And what was that? Solution surgeries.
Solution surgery. I love that term.
Yeah. So I guess that's something everybody can take away right now and implement, isn't it? Create a time, create a drop-in and things like that, where people can go and get together.
Exactly
and
that, yeah.
Develop. In terms of then people and bringing them along, I know we've been talking before the podcast started, and we talked a little bit about you kind of split between company objectives and your overall where you're going as a business, and then we mentioned the term citizen development. Can you explain a little bit about what that is, maybe why it can be dangerous, along with your company goals and why you should be aware of it in terms of digital transformation projects.
So citizen development was the phrase that Microsoft really started pushing when they launched like Power Platform a number of years ago, and I think pushed it too far to the point where the platform started to be looked at by professional IT and enterprise IT as, well, that's just something someone does to automate their emails. That's not a tool for me. And I think Microsoft went so far that way that the whole vision was, oh, everyone's going to be building their own applications all the time, and and their chatbots and all that kind of stuff. And particularly anyone who sits in IT, they don't want that. Like you don't want huge amounts of end user compute being built up. There's a huge amount of risk there because it's the old Access databases where people were able to just set up systems and they run independently. And it's very hard to run a business if you don't know where the data is, particularly, especially now when we've got more data protection laws than anything than ever before. So it's risky if we just go all the way and just say, right, here you go, here's all the licenses, here's all the tools you need, go mad. That's not going to work. It's going to be a breach, or you're going to be creating duplication of systems and all that kind of stuff. But there is a middle ground to be had where you can empower citizens, or I don't like using the word citizen, like your business users, your colleagues, people that you want to train up as a technologist who maybe their day-to-day job isn't doing development or building solutions, but they know the business problem inside out. They know the business process inside out. And they've probably got a lot of ideas about how they can improve it. Now, you want to empower that as much as possible so that they've got, maybe they've got a small development environment where you've trained them up prior, you've shown them some of the low-code tools, particularly in this case, you've shown them what it could do, and you've given them a small environment where they can experiment. Very controlled from our point of view. It's not going to send any data anywhere, but they're able to upskill, play about, come up with a solution, break things internally, and then say, well, actually, this is quite useful. Now, you want to then look at that and go, okay, that's a fairly good solution there. How many people is that going to affect? Well, it's your small team. You can use that. There's not too much of the data you require. Okay, we've had a look at that now. We reviewed that. That looks good. You can run that. You can run that within your department, your particular team. But where it gets to a more enterprise-wide solution where, okay, this is a process that's going to go across a number of teams, and there's a lot of data in there and all this kind of stuff, and you start to get sort of alarm bell ringings from a enterprise risk perspective. That's when you sort of take that in-house a bit more and say, right, we're still going to work with you, we're going to upskill you as a result, you're still going to be fully involved in this, but we need to take this through our overall process. We need to make sure this is fully architected in the way that go against all the principles that we've defined. So I think some organizations have gone full out on citizen development, given everyone a Power Platform license, and then probably regretted it a little bit. When I was a consultant, I used to advise in these kind of things, setting up these center of excellences, etc. But at PwC, we didn't give it to everyone. We had a huge community. I mean, PwC at the time, 26,000 people, and we had like 500-600 people who were Power Platform interested. So we're interested in this citizen development piece. It was more, ask for it and we'll give you the training. There's some prereqs we want you to hit. So it really depends. And sometimes you might look at a smaller organization and think, well, actually, because there's only 600 as opposed to 26,000, you can have a bit more control around that, and that might be more of a candidate for it. But I think ultimately, to answer the question, it's still people are trying to find a middle ground. But the key thing that we're trying to do as part of that is the business problem you always want to solve is, we've got an issue. Can IT or your technology or your transformation team fix that? And they've got a big old backlog of things they're trying to work through, and people get frustrated because they're like, well, I'm not being listened to, or I'm not being able to do that to get what I need done, and that's affecting my day-to-day. Now, there's a percentage of those problems that they have that can be fixed by technology that might not need a full set of developers, etc., to go through. We can actually empower the business to do so, and that's the problem it should be solving. Those things that are very small, but they build up, and then overall you start to create a culture where people are gaining new skills, but also solving their own problems in-house because they've got the knowledge about it as well.
I think that was a perfect answer in terms of, like, it links back to culture for me, because if you're really restrictive and you're saying we have to do this X, Y, and Z, people are going to go out and find these ways of doing stuff, and there's the whole shadow IT stuff where you can't manage it then, and 7IM being a regulated industry and having sensitive data, that's really dangerous. Whereas, like you say, going too far the other way and letting everybody loose on a system they don't quite understand, people are going to go in and different directions. There's not going to be any centralized kind of strategy. And that middle ground is, I guess, once you've got that culture right, people can do that. They feel empowered, which I think you mentioned as well, but is done in line with company goals. It's managed, it's secured and maintained properly. So probably that leads me on to the next question then. In terms of what are some emerging technologies that you see right now, Power Platform or otherwise, that companies should be looking at, maybe you guys are looking at, and what might also kind of fall into that hybrid approach?
So I think any answer to this question nowadays is going to say those two letters, right? It's going to be AI related. But I think the biggest change I've noticed over the last 2 years is people got excited about things like ChatGPT and like Copilot and whatnot. Yeah. And that's changed the way people are thinking about it, or it's got a lot more attention on it. So we've seen some, a lot of productivity gains where people they've got a problem, and instead of going to Google it now, they might go to ChatGPT or they might go to Copilot. And that starts to give them attention when they start to think about the other things they can do. They're actually coming up with an AI use case, but it's normally actually traditional AI. It's not like a large language model that's, of the recent advancements. It might be machine learning or image recognition or document processing, all those kind of stuff. So I think more than the emerging technology being something people should pay attention to, and now there is increasingly features coming in the Microsoft stack that are easy for business users to use, or the adoption curve is a lot easier. But there's an opportunity now for people who like AI or like these technologies to actually do more of these projects. Yeah. Because now everyone's thinking about it and they're saying, "Oh, I've got a great idea for this because we can get AI to look at that, or AI will do that," and that's fine. It's not quite what they mean, but there's an opportunity there to actually do this kind of stuff. So all the traditional things, like I say, of machine learning, which are still really complex technologies and require a lot of development and a lot of thought behind it. There's now a lot more opportunity to do such things, and then as a result, you'll start to slowly build up those things. Now, as we were discussing before, what you quickly find around AI is you need to have the base foundations in there before now. Have you got a sound technology estate? Have you got the right data to do what you want to do with it? So anything like large language model, things like that, you really need to think about that first. Turning on something like Copilot, I know a lot of organizations turned it on and got, God, we've got so many SharePoint sites, all this information on, and we didn't realize that each person could access this particular site. So there's a lot of sort of eye-opening things that I think have come as a result of that being turned on. But overall, the emerging technologies, AI, there seems to be a chat interface for everything now. And some of the benefits of Power Platform are included in the licenses. You would want to build an application and put a chatbot on the front to query your data. It's pretty much out of the box now and just happens. Now, I don't know, I think Satya or someone like that was saying that SaaS might be over and people are going to only interface with chatbots. I don't think that's going to be the case. I can't see that happening. I certainly don't want in my work to only ever interact via chat. Yeah. It could be ingrained in me, but I quite like clicking on a system and doing things. I don't need to have a conversation with it every time. I think it'd be quite exhausting as well, right? If we're having conversations via Teams with each other and then with individuals and then having to tell the computer what we want to do rather than just doing it, I think that might go away. But overall, AI is the wave. You can ride that as someone who's interested in that internally organization, as someone who's wanting to make change happen and has now got attention from your bosses, your C-suite, your sponsors, but also, in the partner world and as a consultant, people want to find out more about it. So you can get a lot more opportunities there too.
I think, AI is the sexy seller at the minute, isn't it? I'd say my experience has been similar in that where you'd have to try and push someone to change their mindset and be interested in something. This wave of AI or the media around AI has helped create that movement that you don't need to. But what we see as well is the exact same thing. The people say, can AI do this? But in reality, they might be talking about process automation or something quite basic that's been around forever, but they've never been interested or engaged with it. So it's interesting. And I think people think quite small, though. You mentioned there about chatbots. Like everybody's go-to is, I'll get it to write me this. I'll get it to do my marketing. I'll get it to this. No one's really thinking about bigger picture stuff. And I think the demographic and the population getting younger is going to change probably how we're going to interact with things. And I know in our world, and this again is not specifically AI, but we see that the younger owned companies don't necessarily want to pick up the phone and ring us. They want to self-serve.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to utilizing tools like AI, they'll use them differently to the older generation, because we're used to doing something in a different way or speaking to people.
Yeah.
I did see a real good example of how someone had used AI in quite a basic way, but they'd utilized basically the Google Notebook LM.
Oh yeah.
So new staff onboarding, instead of getting them to read a massive 30-page handbook, they'd created a mini audio podcast based off the staff handbook. And again, that staff member at some point probably does need to read all the T's and C's and the legal bits in it, but it gave them a really easy, digestible way to absorb that information and not be like day one just reading 30 pages of a handbook.
100%. I'd definitely rather do that than read a book. It's like similar. Spotify did a thing with their Spotify Wrapped, didn't they? And they used that Google Notebook, and it started to do a podcast about your listening habits as well, which one was super interesting. But the worst thing for me about that one is it picked up on my listening habits of some varied music taste over the last couple of years, and it definitely was described me as if I was like a teenage girl, and that was the worst thing. It pretty much, I was like, this is. Yeah, it definitely doesn't think I'm like 30-year-old male.
I think those sort of things, the more of that people do, and that I saw that Spotify one, it was really good, the more it's going to open people's minds up, isn't it, to what's possible and how they can do it. So in terms of then, I guess, critical steps when planning digital transformation, because we kind of touched on it there with getting the right building blocks in place, what should somebody who's looking to go out and make a change like 7IM are or have recently, what should their first step be? Should they be speaking to people? Should they be evaluating like gap analysis? What critical steps are involved prior to launching that strategy?
I think always, and this is when you're starting a project, when you're mid transformation, and when you're sort of evaluating its success, you always need to start with a why. What is the objective that you're doing this for? And normally that should align with your strategic objectives overall.
Okay.
Now, for most organizations, that's going to be either we want to sell more, we want to be more effective with the people we've got, we want to reduce our costs in some area. Everything past that is almost non-plus, because if you don't meet those goals overall, then it gets to a point of, right, what's the actual point of that? So start with that first. Like, what is our overall objective we're trying to do with that? And then go down to the next level. Okay, what are the business problems we have at the moment which are preventing us from hitting those 2-3 key objectives? And some of them, or a lot of them, will be people and process related, and therefore digital transformation related. And then from that level, we go, okay, we know we've got a problem with processing this particular thing here, or we just can't keep up with the demand in a particular area. From that point, I think you want to deep dive into that. So speaking to the business itself, right? What are the problems you're facing? How do you think this could be improved? If you do that sort of exercise to begin with, you've got sort of your thesis, what you're trying to achieve. Now at that point, you're like, okay, we want to do X. We're going to do it with this particular digital transformation project. But you shouldn't, at that point, don't be like, and it's going to take X amount of money or X amount of time, because all you've got at the moment is a problem or objective.
Yeah.
At that point, then you want to, if you have an in-house team, start to engage them on the way that I think is the best way to do it. I always think it's worthwhile getting some external advice regardless, even if you've got an in-house team.
Yeah.
Your in-house team's going to be, they have some of the way of working that's been in that organization for any number of years. Having an external view of a consultant or anyone in that world who's got a bit of a different perspective, they sit in different industries, they've got experience of working with a number of clients, that's going to help as well, because you're only one organization. No matter how the size of that you're going to be, it's always good to know that. And you don't need to do that in a paid formative way, right? Having a network of people in your particular industry is great as well.
Yeah.
So being able to speak with any industry that you're in, but there will be forums that you can join. There will be networking events. There will be, go out for a coffee with people in the industry, and you're not always a competitor in that way, right?
Yeah.
There's usually in most industries enough to go around for everyone.
Yeah.
And I found that as well, that both being on the consultant side, Microsoft particularly very good at promoting the community events. The AI event tomorrow, I'm sure I'll see a lot of people that I've known over the years that worked in different consultancies, where you share ideas and build that up. Now that can be the same if you're an organization as well. If you're the CTO who's thinking about what to do, you will know other people in similar roles who will have done similar things.
Yeah.
If you're a developer who's more interested in building a large language model, you can probably quickly find people who've got that interest. So building that expertise both in a formative paid way, but just from your own network can be really useful as well. So there you've got this is what we want to do. Okay, I've got some advice and we've got our own thoughts about how we want to do it. And then I think the key thing after that is trying to build it in manageable chunks. Because if you get something that's a project or digital transformation, transformation should be the overall piece, but within that there's going to be projects and particular deliverables and everything like that. Trying to make them small enough that they can be delivered at pace, but large enough so that they're impactful. If you've got something that goes on for months and months and months, past a year, the problem is it's quite hard to keep your business engaged or your end users engaged over that point. They might be engaged at the beginning, they'll lose a bit of interest, and then they'll be really interested right at the end. And then I say, what about this? And you go, oh, you didn't say that at the beginning. But also, so you need to keep them engaged. But also requirements are going to change over time, right?
Yeah.
So it's always a mixture between being truly agile and one thing of saying plan for a long time and execute quickly. Because the longer something's going on, you've got the risk of the requirement change and you've got the risk of something external coming in. So it could be a competitor, a regulatory activity, the economy, COVID, any of these kind of things can come in. So you want to be executing your deliverable for as short a time as possible, but deliver value. And what that does as well is then you start to gain momentum, the culture starts to really improve, everyone gets really sort of G'd up by the success because you can say, right, we've delivered that's not live, that's not live, that's not live. And then the sum of that all comes up to your transformation, but then you've got, there's some of those things, realistically, are they actually achieving that strategic goal that you set in the beginning? And then regularly review it as well, right? What you don't want to do is set a 3-year plan and keep going on for 18 months in if the environment's changed. Be agile, let it change if that's the case.
I was going to ask about measuring success, which you touched on there, and I think the why, starting with that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But we probably see a lot of time where people just see something shiny, as I mentioned, we talked about earlier. Oh, I want that. And especially, I think with techies, we naturally want new technology and want to play with things, but unless you understand the why, it's harder to develop and align. It's harder to measure success, isn't it? Because you're not quite sure why you're doing it in the first place. So they're real good points. In terms of then, we touched on AI a little bit. What trends in the next sort of 5 years, either in general or sort of things that you'd be looking at 7am, do you think will come into play, will become, I guess, dominant in the way we're working and the way we run IT?
So I think the way people are interacting with IT is definitely changing, and that's going to affect IT professionals like ourselves or people who have these kind of projects. It's a load of people are going to have a lot more ideas, as we were touching before, around AI, but the way you solve problems before might not have been the same way, because people are getting productivity gains by going onto Copilot and saying, right, what are my key meetings I'm going to today? And that's the most basic use of it. But as that starts to grow and people get more used to it, I always joke there's going to be a period, the Copilot, etc., can answer emails. It's going to be AI just talking to AI, and the humans are just going to be pressing a button in between them. We need to think, what does that actually mean? Email's been the business form of communication for God knows how long, and post-COVID, it's kind of moved a little bit to chat internally, still externally. It depends on your relationship with the organization. But if we are getting to a point where our emails that are talking to each other, which are normal business communication, we're not really writing them. Yeah. I mean, I do it as well. I'm guilty of anything. Why write 5 sentences when I can write one thing and just tweak it on the basis of that? What does that actually mean in terms of our business process? Because are our relationships still being built internally with our external people? And how does that then fundamentally come down to technology? So I think there'll be a wave of AI things that get driven and people say AI and all that kind of stuff. But the actual effect on that might be that people start working a little bit differently as well. And if we can be more efficient with our AI technologies, then there's overall sort of workforce things that you need to look at now. People want to do more with less, 100%. But we need to make sure we're upskilling the people who are getting more available time, right? You don't want to just create time just to get rid of people. That's not what AI should be about. No. It should be about getting people to not have to sit there doing manual tasks, the same thing over and over again, give them more enjoyable work. Now, that should be the trend we're looking for. So you're gaining the efficiency, but people are happier. If people are happier, your costs are actually improved because your attrition is down and people are more productive. And that's the thing we really should be looking to challenge with it, that we're now more effective with this process. What can we do with that spare capacity? And now we've got further tools that spare time can be used with to come up with ideas, to brainstorm, to do those kind of particular things. But I do think the trend will continue where there will be the traditional AI technologies will get more interest. And I think the biggest thing that I've always found, as I've gone into different industries when I was a consultant, and obviously now sitting in financial services and speaking to others in this industry, is the technology estate is not still done. Like, people have got large on-prem elements. People aren't fully cloud. People are hybrid. There's still a lot of that to be done. We can't just tick and say everyone's cloud now. It's far from it. But if you want to use these technologies that are coming, you're going to have to be. So I still think over the next 5 years, there's going to be maybe even just as much as a push there was when the cloud first came out for organizations to catch up, to accelerate, because to be able to use that stuff, they need to be there. So I think AI is what's driving it for the right or wrong reasons, but organizations are modernizing as a result. And it would be what we're trying to do is actually give people better work to do as a result of it.
Yeah. So I guess the goals are kind of still the same, just the tools and maybe the reasoning is changed. Just finally, before we kind of start to wrap up, you touched on COVID a little bit. Internally, at everyone, we saw it as kind of one of the biggest drivers of change within the clients here, especially when it came to older, more traditional thinking companies, and the fact that people maybe didn't adopt or have any form of remote working, and overnight they were forced to change to it. What was your experience like?
So I started COVID in the middle of a global project that was going on. So we were sort of halfway through. So there was an element of remote about that already, because it was, all 4 regions of the world. But suddenly we were running this, and it was right midway through. So it's quite a pivotal point. We now had to run this all remotely, all via Teams, which was definitely an experience. And then I moved to PwC, and at the same time when I was at PwC, the same thing had happened. So big, large ERP program for a local council, who definitely didn't have anything remote. So when, like, pretty much March 2020, whenever it was, one day they had to suddenly, it must have been terrible for the IT team, they had to suddenly issue laptops, they had to get Teams license, they had to get people used to that ways of working. That's in the middle of a big digital transformation at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was a learning in itself for people to get used to. And, suddenly, I'm a big fan of being in person with your clients, with your teams. I think you can get way more done. And now any project that was running from 2020 to 2022, realistically, might have been fully remote, and some still fully are remote now. And that can be fine for the vast majority. But I always like to think of a project get the kickoff in person at least, so you've met each other. You've had a coffee together or something like that, and then have maybe not once a sprint, but every couple of sprints, if it is a remote project, try and get some of the team together to build those relationships, because ultimately when it becomes more difficult and you need to work together around it, having that, being connected before rather than through the screen is particularly key. I think some organizations will have gone all the way now and they're just fully remote, and they'll be missing out on that particular thing. I also think as a result, where some people are in the office, some people aren't. I'm pro office, but I'm pro office for a number of reasons. I like doing it. I like being with my team, but I've always been a fan of promoting youth and bringing people through. Graduates, etc. I was always given a really good opportunity from more seniors when I was at that age to be involved in projects and all those kind of things. I always want to pay that forward, but it's quite hard to do that through a screen. And there's loads of things that now, as a younger person in the workforce, you miss out on overhearing a conversation that your boss is having or that your colleagues are having. And often, if you're working in technology like we do, they'll be solving a problem. And if you're in a remote world, you have to be on that one-to-one call to do it, and you might not do it. And it's probably better for them as well, because you might come up with an idea there. That I'm really passionate about, in making sure that we're not missing out on that for people. So, I can 100% see the benefits of remote work and the impact that's had on delivering projects and delivering things quicker. And, not some people not having to spend hours commuting, and they're being more productive as well. And they've got the ability to stay in contact with their clients and their teams way easier now than they did 3 or 4 years ago. But I do think, I don't want us to, just as the older generation of this, or I don't know, how am I the older generation, middle generation, or whatever, sort of take all the advantages and then get to a point where we go, I don't want people to be moaning and go, oh God, the youth of today, they're really not bringing forward their skills. It's like, well, are you training them? Are you there? Are you engaging with them? And that's the risk that we get with this benefit of remote working. And there are hundreds, and we're really seeing that. But it really hits technology, I think, particularly because we're working with computers, but we're solving business problems with people. And the best way, it's like the rubber duck problem. If you're trying to work out an issue, even if you're sat there alone, put a rubber duck on the side and just talk to it, talk out your issue, and you'll actually able to solve the problem itself. I'd rather people are just talking to people rather than rubber ducks. That's what we can potentially do instead.
Yeah, I think, again, I share the same sort of view. Like, we obviously have a hybrid approach here. And we mentioned before, like, we've got people in South Africa and they physically can't come here. We have to work extra hard when it comes to that kind of water cooler chat and getting people sat around to debrief on problems when we've solved them. So I think it's definitely something people who are fully remote are missing out on. Obviously, technology gives us all these great advantages to work remotely, but it creates these people problems. And I did have, in another episode, we talked to someone else about there's certain probably young people that have come into the workplace since COVID and only ever work remotely.
Yeah.
And I think that creates a challenge when that group of people gets older and that's all they've ever known. And this probably, again, is why technology is going to have to adapt and change to the way people want to work and self-serve and all this kind of stuff, because they've had a completely different working experience to you and I.
One thing I always like to do with remote teams, particularly to try and build that culture, is that even PwC, my team they'd be in offices together, they'd be in different offices around the country, right? And you have it now with your South African team, etc. We used to try and get on a Friday a half an hour where there was a call where there was no agenda and there was nothing. People always have their team calls, and it often seems to be like the team lead or the boss or whatever.
Yeah.
So just talking and giving an update, or everyone go around and say what they're working on, and that then becomes another call which is no more important than any other one, because you're like, right, what have I got to say in this call? What have I got to do? Probably the most powerful half an hour we had of the week, where people just came on. It was a Friday, which obviously spirits are high on a Friday, which always helps, but just chatted about whatever. And we would get really high engagement in those calls. And if I compared from prior when we didn't do that and we had the team calls, attendance, to where doing this, it would go up and people would look forward to it. When you get feedback saying, oh, I look forward to that call because I can just have a chat, get to know each other. And people would just be laughing their heads off about the most ridiculous things, or you play some of those virtual games that you could have, but something that was not related to your work at that time, just to bring that culture together. And then, one time it's not going to do anything, but when you have that regularly over a number of weeks and months, then you do start to build that even remotely at that point, because people are more relaxed and you get to know them a bit more, rather than we're just talking about this problem or we're just giving an update in a very structured form of manner.
I think we all did those over COVID, didn't we? Those online quizzes.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. And I think Teams has come a long way, hasn't it? Prior to COVID, everyone's like, can you stop this popping up on my PC? And it starts. Yeah. And then virtually, like, the COVID window has changed to how useful it is and it's the kind of centre of our Microsoft world and platform at the minute, isn't it? All right, perfect. I think there's some real good pieces of info in there for people, and it's been really useful. I've got a closing tradition. So can you share with me one piece of tech, an application, or something like that, which either in your work or personal life you wouldn't want to live without nowadays?
So I'm not going to say anything AI related. The temptation was there. It'll be my Garmin.
Okay.
So I've always been a big fan of the fitness trackers.
Yeah.
Anyway, but when I got this one particularly, it sort of changed my life in everything I do. So every time I do a workout, I'm like looking at what effect did that have on me? And it gives me like a scale of whether you're maintaining your fitness or you're overtraining, which rarely happens, but or you're not doing enough. And then also like the effect it starts. I sort of in after you go have a couple of drinks, and then you see your resting heart rate's like spiking up over a couple of days, and then start to consider that as well, and then it becomes kind of addictive. But I think probably addictive in a good way, because you're addicted to your health. Every time I'm going, I'm massively playing paddle at the moment as well. I've got to make sure it turns it on, because I just enjoy seeing on the GPS just this scribble up and down on the map of a guy just running back and forth, usually losing a paddle match. So that for me, and more than anything, and in a tech world nowadays where every time you get a new iPhone, for example, the battery's good for the first week and it's terrible. This thing lasts 16 days.
Right. Okay.
Which I got to charge it twice a month, which is amazing, because the biggest thing about that is you never have to worry about it. It just almost feels like a normal watch, and you get all the benefits of the tech.
I suppose it's your own is your own mini digital transformation happening as well, isn't it? So it's very on brand.
Yeah. I'll use that one.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for being a guest.
Thank you very much. It's been great to speak to you.
That's all for this episode of the Tech Remedy podcast. I hope you found it insightful and have some useful takeaways for your business. Please don't forget to share the podcast with anybody else it may help and subscribe for future episodes to come.